Happy Wednesday. It happens to be my birthday today. So I've been having my second birthday cup of coffee. I'm 52 years young today. um, so today I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to give a few minutes because I know it takes people 7 to 10 minutes to start joining these things. I did announce this. We've got multiple things going on here. At some point, I'll be able to connect TikTok and YouTube and all of these things together. But good morning if you're just joining. So it's my birthday today, and I'm flipping things around, and I'm going to give some teachings today. I don't normally really do that on these lives. I'll pick a topic and we'll talk about it, and I might teach something about it. But I decided that I'm gonna, I don't know, I'm gonna do some teachings just for something a little bit different and to, um, celebrate my birthday today. So, um, I picked a bunch of random stuff that I'm gonna teach about today, and I might go off in different directions. So, forgive me if it's not exactly as I laid things out in the description here, but I am going to talk about. I'm going to talk about different things. I'm going to teach different things today. I'm going to talk about building an ancestral altar. So an altar for ancestral spirits. Mine's up here at the moment. It's going to move soon. Good morning. Oh, thank you so much for the happy birthday wishes. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining and thank you for the birthday wishes. I'm 52 years young today as of 5:55 a.m. I was born on a Monday, but it is a Wednesday at 5:55. I'm an early bird. I always have been since I was born. I was born not, I guess, technically prematurely, but about a week early. I was due on here's interesting. I was due on leap year. There's lots of weird stuff around my birthday. I was due on a leap year, which this year is also a leap year. So we'll have a February 29th this year. But I was due on February 29th, born on February 21st. Born at 5:55 a.m. Picked an angel number, I guess, to be born. And fun fact, I actually turned 30 twice because I was in the Philippines on my birthday and climbed into what it turned over into my birthday. It was like midnight or something. And then we flew over the date line and it was the day before my birthday again. So I got to have my birthday all over again. So when I turned 30, 22 years ago, that happened twice. So it's kind of a fun fact. Um, I'm going to start out. I'm going to talk about altars a little bit to start. I'm going to do more than that today. Like I said, I picked a bunch of random. It's like I'm having a birthday party for myself, and but I'm giving away random stuff to people. I don't know if that's a thing, but it's a thing now. So I'm going to give away some random teachings today, I guess. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about so this shelf up here, this top shelf, is an ancestral altar. You can't see everything on it, and that's fine. But it has a photo of my would be my great grandfather and his family down to my great grandfather from the late 1800s. It has some offering cups, some other items up there. It has a bell that belonged to my grandmother. My grandmother was a school teacher and she collected bells. So I have a school bell up there that belonged to my grandmother. So let's talk a little bit about ancestral altars, why you might want one, what you would put on one. And I'll start out by saying that if you come from a culture that has ancestral altars, such as many Asian cultures would normally have an ancestral altar somewhere in their house, go with that. I'm respecting everybody's culture. here. So go with that. Go with whatever your culture says is appropriate for an ancestral altar. But let's say you don't have a connection to a culture that actively uses ancestral altars. At some point in time, I believe almost every culture out there had some sort of ancestor worship. So I have a background in Norse shamanism, for example, and in Norse shamanism, or in Norse belief, we had the Disir. The Disir were mother. They're not really deities. They're spiritual beings that were our, I want to say, foremothers, right? So they're mothers that came before us. So swipe right to see more comments. Yeah, okay. Um, so uh, so there's ancestor worship in almost every culture that I can think of to some degree, and of course everybody has it through their own cultural lens. So why might you want to create an ancestral altar? And I'll give you some guidelines, some things that, rules of thumb. There's no rules in spirituality except those that humans create. But I'll give you some things that will, in my experience, um, be important to know about creating and keeping an ancestral altar. And I'm going to talk about some other things today too, but that'll be the first one. So, from a shamanic perspective, our ancestors are a source of power for us. Even we all have ancestors who are crummy at some point. If you go, back far enough, and sometimes very, very close, right? So it doesn't matter if you had ancestors who were colonizers or ancestors who were slave owners or ancestors. We all have crummy people in our ancestry. That's not what I'm talking about. We don't borrow that crummy behavior as part of our heritage, or at least I hope not. But our ancestors all had incredible strength. So, you know, um, my grandmother passed away about a year ago. She was 106. And when I think about her and her family growing up in rural Maine, not not farmers, but still living in the sticks with no running water or electricity. And I think about not incredibly cold days. Today's not incredibly cold, but it's about you know 15 degrees Fahrenheit this morning, below 0 centigrade. It's cold, and it got way colder back then. And um, just living through that and living for 106 years, there's an amazing amount of strength there. And we are connected, we're intimately connected with our ancestors. Obviously, they pass DNA to us, but there's a spiritual component, or a spiritual um, framework on which our physical reality is built. And that includes our DNA heritage. Not only that, but we know that ancestral wounds can be passed down. They do epigenetic testing on animals, but also on people, and have found that trauma can be detected epigenetically in across generations. So, like the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, or they have like worms that they tested. That I don't know how you traumatize a worm, but they can put it under harsh conditions, and then like 23 generations later still pick up changes. So physically we pass things down, and not just blue eyes or blonde hair or whatever, not just physical characteristics, but we pass down our trauma, we pass down our wounding, but we also pass down our strength. And our ancestors, even if they, by our measure, would be crummy people today, historically, maybe they weren't very nice people or whatever, maybe they were oppressors or colonizers or what have you. Um, if they're an ancestor, they have passed on. And when you pass on and you kind of cross over, you go to soul school. A lot of that junk is removed, right? And the ancestors that stick around and are interested in your well-being are not going to maintain a level of crumminess. We'll put it that way. So our ancestors can be a source of a great deal of strength. So an altar, and most people kind of instinctively know what an altar is, but an altar is a place to where you can participate in spiritual activities. It's a point of focus, right? It's usually a surface, but not always. So in Andean shamanism, for example, they set a mesa, which means table, but it's actually just a cloth they put on the ground that becomes a temporary altar. So altars can be permanent, they can be temporary, they can be whatever, and all you need is a surface that is hopefully safe from animals and children and that sort of thing. And there are cultural rules about setting up altars. Sometimes they have to be at a higher point in the house or that sort of thing. If that's true for you, if you live in a culture where altars are a thing, um, go with that. Go with the cultural rules around building altars. But you don't need a big thing or a dedicated table or anything. An altar is created through intention. It's a surface, so it has representation in the physical world, although you can have altars in non-ordinary reality. So you can have altars that don't have physical representation, but I won't get into that today. um, but you can think of it as an interface. You can think of it as a space that becomes sacred. It's set aside because it is special, and it's special because you treat it as special, right? You set sacred objects there, or things that represent things, or whatever. And the more you do spiritual work there, the more it is imbued with power. Now, an ancestral altar is also serves a little bit as a doorway through which ancestral spirits can come in and out, right? It helps them, it helps you communicate with them, but it also helps them communicate with you and cross into um sort of middle world, what we would consider middle world space in um shamanic language. And so, my first rule of thumb about setting up an ancestral altar is don't put it in a room where people sleep. So, this one happens to be almost at the exact center of my house, which is really good. It's good to have an ancestral altar in your home. You can have altars outdoors. I have an outdoor altar, but to have an ancestral altar in your home is a good idea. And the reason is that our ancestors act as protecting spirits. And so they will protect your home. They will look out for the occupants of the home, including your pets, that sort of thing. So the next question is, what sorts of things what should I put on my ancestral altar if I'm setting up an ancestral altar? Okay, I've got a space. It could be a shelf, it could be a small table, it could be a windowsill. It doesn't matter. It just needs to be a surface. I would clean it fairly regularly. I'll talk about offerings in a moment, but take offerings away that if their food offerings go bad, or that before they go bad, that sort of thing. I'll talk about offerings. Offerings are an important thing that you can do at an altar space. Um so what sort of things do you put on an ancestral altar specifically? So you can see mine. I've got there's a candle back there. There's a couple of candles in front of it as well. So I have candles there. I have a goblet there and a bunch of small, what I call offering cups. They're a bunch of little silver cups. I think they were probably used, I got them at like a thrift store. I think they were probably used for communion. Not sure. Not 100% sure of that. Got them at a thrift store, little silver cups. I use those for offerings. And again, I'm going to talk about offerings in a moment. There is a photo of some of my ancestors. There's something that my grandmother owned back there. So you can put images, idols, things that represent your ancestry. Now, if you don't have items that belong to your ancestors or photos of your ancestors or paintings or anything like that, it's fine. Because again, the altar is created with intention. So what you can put there are items that represent if you have a cultural heritage. So my family's rather mixed, but I strongly identify with my Scottish and Irish ancestors, so I could put some things up there that were, traditionally Celtic, or I have Norse ancestors, so I could put some Norse items there. If you have something that connects you to your ancestors, put it on there. Items that you place on an altar become sacred objects. Particularly the more you use the altar, the sit in front of it and meditate or pray, or I actually recommend speaking to your ancestors out loud. That might sound crazy, but there is something in esoteric practice about vibrating the air, using your vocal cords to actually vibrate the air. So this is something I learned from Betsy Bergstrom. If anybody knows who she is, she's a pretty well-known shamanic teacher. You can talk to spirits in your head, but if you do that, they will get used to communicating with you that way. And so they can become sort of intrusive and just start talking to you when you aren't uh, ready. So, well, spirits don't often talk back physically, although sometimes, and I've experienced that. I've experienced that in a couple of times. Um, Speak with them physically, and that lets them know, okay, now I'm communicating with you. Now I'm opening communication with you, right? When you call in the spirits or you talk to your ancestors, you can talk to specific ancestors or ancestors in general, and they will listen. But the altar is a good thing to have to speak with them. Why? What's so powerful about ancestral spirits? Well, first of all, they're spirits that lived on the earth, so they understand earthly matters and they understand things. And for whatever reason, they take um they take they take interest in us, their descendants. They want us to do well in the world and that sort of thing. um what if you don't have good feelings about your ancestors? Like, they didn't like you, like maybe they didn't like you that much. So my take on that is that your ancestors, your actual ancestors who have died and crossed over, maybe there are ancestral spirits that don't like you that much. So speak to the ancestors that do like you. We all have thousands of ancestors. So speak specifically to the ancestors that want to help you, that want to like you. In my experience, when people die and cross over, they don't really like hold a grudge, or don't like our lifestyle, or whatever it is that is problematic. um thank you very much for birthday wishes. Good question. Okay, so here's a question: if somebody had an ancestor who did things like voodoo to try to harm others, do you think upon crossing over they would change their ways, so to speak? um yeah, that's a very good question. I do I do think that there is that happens very often. People who live a life in which they harmed others. So I can't speak specifically about voodoo, and there's nothing inherently harmful about voodoo. Voodoo is a religion, and but voodoo practitioners do have the ability to harm others, as do other spiritual practitioners. There are shamans who do have engage in spiritual warfare. Not something I recommend specifically. Um, but So I can't speak specifically about somebody having done voodoo to harm other people or whatever. But what I can say is that I helped someone cross over their grandfather, and their grandfather, so did psychopomp work for this person's grandfather, and this person's grandfather had been a criminal and had murdered more than one person. This was known. And the reason this person hadn't crossed over is that they were worried they were going to go to hell. Right. So, I can tell you that our concept of hell was mainly invented. Um, it was invented in the early days of Christianity, based on the Greek concept of Hades. The word hell comes from the the Norse word hell, which is the goddess of the underworld, but also the place where the deceased go who didn't die in battle. So it's just sort of the afterlife. So he was worried about hell and didn't cross over, and had murdered a lot of people. A fair number of people anyway. And so I did not he did not go to I've never experienced anything that resembles what we think of it as hell in any of my work and any of my psychopomp work, which is psychopomp is when you help spirits cross over. Um, have not experienced that even for somebody who has done some horrible things. So I've seen those spirits come back as a helping spirit for the person, ancestral spirit. So even somebody who's like, full of hatred and that sort of thing, um, crossover, they do people, death is a huge change, as one might imagine. And we go over the ego, let's go a little bit. And one of the main reasons why people do harmful things is ego attachment, right? Attachment to the ego, attachment to I am separate from you, and so I can do things that harm you. And then when the ego kind of dissolves, you realize I am not separate from you. And even though I might have that perception sometimes, when I do things to harm you, I am harming myself as well. And that's the reality of karma, actually. When I do harmful things or hurtful things to other people, those other people are just aspects of my true self. As I'm an aspect of your true self, as you're an aspect of our true self is one being back there. And so if we do things that harm other people, we're doing things that harm ourselves. And that truth, when we die, is laid bare pretty well. That being said, um, there are spirits who don't cross over for whatever reason. They're afraid of something happening, or they're, whatever. And there are people who use ancestral spirits to curse. You know, I don't want to talk too much about cursing. Cursing's such a weird. I generally don't curse. I say generally, I don't curse, and I don't teach cursing. It's important to understand cursing harming people through uh baneful esoteric means, baneful magic, baneful shamanism, baneful spirituality, whatever it is. It's important to understand that so you can protect against it and that sort of thing. But not something I recommend. But here's the thing. Um, So there's a story told by Jason Miller, who's an author I like a whole lot, and he calls himself a sorcerer. He's an esoteric teacher and works a lot with spirits, and in fact has a book called Consorting with Spirits that I recommend. Um, and he talks about cursing, and is it bad, and does it incur bad karma? And uh he talks about he was working on behalf of somebody who had a stalker, and this stalker was dangerous. It wasn't just somebody who was like, following them around or whatever, which is bad enough. This person was dangerous, and so he did some work, and this stalker had this person he's working for was a woman, and the stalker was male, and the male uh he did some cursing activity on this person, and the person fell off a ladder as he was trying to climb through her window while she was sleeping, and I think he was armed as well, so clearly bad intentions. And so you know so the stalker like fell off this ladder, I think broke a leg or something. um so there was cursing energy there. um but it was probably harm reduction. It was probably the way that this person had to be stopped. They had to be injured so they could be trying to break in to harm this person so they could be arrested. So sometimes there's battle magic, right? There are famous stories about practitioners of magic. So uh, in the UK, we had early on, before there was the UK, we had John Dee, who supposedly called up the storm that turned away the Spanish Armada as they were about to invade England. And then later during World War II, um, England was braced for being invaded by the Axis powers, by Germany in particular. In particular, they were almost 100% sure that was going to happen. That there was going to be a landing. That the Germans were going to sweep, blitzkrieg style across England, whatever. But they would have to come over by ship. Obviously, there was bombing going on and stuff. But to get enough, um, you know, they would have to ship tanks and things like that by ship. And there were people working magically to using battle magic to, on behalf of the war effort. So I can think of three people in particular: Gerald Gardner, who founded Wicca; Aleister Crowley, undoubtedly, was involved with stuff, and I believe Dion Fortune as well. So, um, so there's battle magic as well as, and one could argue that's harmful or whatever. And the Druids used to, one of the reasons why the Romans went and wiped out all the Druid groves is because the Druids would assist the Celts. The Druids were Celts, but they were the priestly caste of the Celts. They would assist them spiritually in battle. They would stand and, either behind the battle or up on a hill or whatever, chanting and calling in magic that was helping them. So the Romans went and wiped out the Druid groves. Um, so and thus, the druidry, that's a tough word, became wiped out. So, but ancestral altar is a really good thing to have. If you don't have an affinity for your ancestors, it's probably good to do some forgiveness work. Forgiveness is about letting go of the emotional charge from somebody who you perceive harm from them, and they might have actually harmed you. It's about letting go of that emotional charge. It's about letting yourself off the hook. It's not about letting them off the hook. I've done whole talks about forgiveness, and I'm sure I'll do it again. There's a great is a is a book. It's pretty rare, actually. It's out of print and like super expensive if you try to get it on Amazon. And I've tried to find like electronic copies or something and have been unlucky so far. Called Unconditional Love and Forgiveness, by a woman. I think her name is Edith Stouffer, and she was a psychologist who practiced something called psychosynthesis. Psychosynthesis was a transpersonal form of psychology. So, was psychology mixed with spirituality, and so all of that was good. And so, anyway, psychosynthesis, and so she has a whole thing on about unconditional love and forgiveness. And her forgiveness process is, if somebody's harmed me and I'm holding on to this energy, a little sip of coffee. Mm, Green Mountain Coffee Roasters this morning again. Um, oh, no worries. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Appreciate the birthday wishes. So anyway, unconditional love and forgiveness. I guess it was a course she used to teach when she was alive, and book came out in the '80s, so it's a little harder to find. You can find used copies, but they're sometimes like $180, whatever. But her thing about forgiveness is as part of her forgiveness process, we forgive ourselves. Now, that might sound weird. Like, why am I forgiving myself for this person who harmed me? I'm forgiving myself because I'm holding on to the harm, right? I'm holding on to the emotion of the harm, or I'm holding on to the harm itself. So, that's there's a whole process that she goes through, and it's based on the teachings of the Essenes. Now, the Essenes were a group in Judea, would now Israel, um, during the slightly before to slightly after the time of Christ. There is an argument that Jesus was an Essene because some of his teachings seem to match up with theirs. As an order, they didn't really last. They were very ascetic and lived in celibacy, lived out in the desert. They thought the cities were corrupt and the temple was corrupt and all of these things. So there's a lot of themes that are similar to um, things that are written about Jesus as well. So flipping the tables of the money lenders or the money changers at the temple, and beating people with a whip, that sort of thing. So there's thought that he was an Essene. Anyway, the Essenes spoke Aramaic, and we know about them because of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So there are lots of teachings there that were contemporary to around the time of Christ, and so they were transcendent. They believed that women were equal to men. They were very radical at that time. In particular, they believed in purity and all of these things. So they have these concepts about our connection to divinity. Um, and so their stuff is also very much in line with a lot of the Gnostic sects that came sort of early on in Christianity, before the Roman Catholic Church kind of came and wiped them all out. So that is the thing. Anyway, so her part of her forgiveness process is forgiving yourself, which might sound counterintuitive. Well, I didn't do anything. But you are holding on to if there's something to be forgiven, you are holding on to something. You're holding on to emotional energy. So when you forgive yourself, you're forgiving yourself for holding on to that energy. So back to ancestral altar. Um, uh, this is this is protective of your space. It's protective of you, of your family. Also, it can help open communication with spirits. And if you do work with ancestral spirits, they can help you with all kinds of things, like um, they can help you with energy body work. They can help you with because they were living at one time in a body, and so they understand that, and they can help you just learn things. They can help you with wisdom. So you an altar is about also building links. So let's talk about offerings for a minute. Um, Offerings can be all kinds of things, depending upon who your altar is dedicated to and that sort of thing. You want to be careful if you have an altar that has, say, deities from a specific culture or something along those lines. You want to be careful about mixing deities, first of all, and having and then that doesn't really apply to my ancestral altar. There are no like deities or anything up there, but I have other altars. Some deities don't get along, and putting them on the same altar is inviting trouble. But also some offerings to certain spirits or certain deities are big no-nos. So in Nepal, for example, the Nagas, these sort of serpent spirits, um, if you offer meat to them, for example, it's considered extremely offensive. So, learn a little bit. But so for ancestral altars, one of the things that you can leave out food or makes good offerings, right? Because particularly for beings that have been embodied, they've been in a body, or they live close to the physical world. So nature spirits, things that are foodstuffs, are good. You can leave out things that are culturally appropriate. So if you have, let's say you have a Norse background, you could leave mead or apples or honey. These are good offerings. If you were to, so for nature spirits where I live, very often I leave out honey or cornmeal, which are traditional for the people that lived in this area prior to colonization. So, good morning. Good morning. Yes, I hope all is well with everybody as well. Um, so we're talking about ancestral altars, just giving a little instruction on why you might set up an ancestral altar, but also leaving offerings. So what happens when you leave an offering is, yes, it is usually a physical thing that you're offering. Um, if it's food, for example, and you can offer other things. If it's food, you are offering the spiritual energy of the food. In animism, which shamanism comes out of, everything, including physical objects, has a spirit, or everything is a spirit. Some things also have physical representation, right? Um, yeah. All right. Let me go back. I think I missed a couple things here. A few minutes behind. Oh, sorry. Sorry that your kid is sick. I'm sorry to hear that. That's tough. Um Psycho, it's psycho, the first part is right. It's psychopomp, POMP, and it's all one word. Um yeah, I could talk about that a little bit. Um Yes, very common that a spirit, even if you're estranged from them, even if you never got along, they cross over, they can come back as a helping spirit or a spirit guide for you. Super common. I've seen that happen quite a bit. Um, yeah, a statue of Hecate and a metal and wood depiction of Mary. Yeah, so both mother goddesses, right? I mean, I guess if you're Christian, you might not call Mary a goddess. I don't, I, you know, but she definitely took over for the figure of Venus or Aphrodite. Um, when paganism was sort of put down, and then Hecate, of course, um, uh, believe it or not, is a mother goddess, goddess of witches and sorcerers, and goddess of the dead. It's interesting that a lot of mother goddesses are also associated with death and destruction. Sort of flip side. So um, Kali, the goddess, the Hindu goddess, is also considered a mother goddess, Kali Ma, and so um, yeah, it's pretty interesting. So Hecate, traditional offerings for Hecate would be like uh, eggs, hard-boiled eggs in particular. Eggs, usually we do like eggs with honey poured over them as an offering to Hecate. So when you make offerings, whatever they happen to be, so um, I'll say this: spirits love spirits. So I will very often, my family. who's up here, happens to like rum a whole lot. I don't know why that is, but so I will very often pour out some dark rum in the offering cups that I have for them, talking to them as I do. Please come and take your sustenance. Depending upon your tradition, I generally do not consume the things that I leave as offerings. Um, it's not a big deal if you do, and then in some cultural contexts, they definitely do consume the things that they leave as offerings, particularly those that can do sacrifices. So if you come from a culture where they sacrifice chickens or goats or whatever, usually those things after they were sacrificed are eaten. So I don't do sacrifices, but I mean not animal sacrifices or people sacrifices, anything like that. But when you are giving something up, technically that's a sacrifice. So when you make offerings, technically that is sacrificial. Um, so you can leave food offerings. You can also, light a candle as an offering to give light. Everything you do with an altar or everything you do spiritually, here's a real like it's not a secret. People talk about this a lot, but it seems like sometimes it blows somebody's mind. I don't know. It's just a principle. It's not really a secret. Whatever you do spiritually, do it with intention. So if I'm leaving an offering, I'm not just going to go over there and like pour some stuff out and walk away. I'm making a I'm intending as I do this, this is an offering. I am giving this so that my helping spirits, my ancestral spirits, can take sustenance from the spiritual aspect of what I'm offering them. Okay. Now, why, if everything has a spirit, why does it matter what we offer? Because every spirit has a different vibratory energetic pattern. And so um spirits can use anything for energy or to yeah, I mean we'll just say for energy or for power, but really what they're really it's easier for them to uh take something that they have an affinity for. And so you'll find there are different rules and different cultures for different deities, things that you are um things that you are offering, different types of incense for different works, different deities will have different incense. There are incense for the planets, and the planets in ancient times represented gods in the sky, stars that moved around. They were the gods and goddesses. Jupiter is Jupiter, and Saturn is Saturn, and or Chiron, or not Chiron. That's somebody different. But Jupiter's Jupiter, Saturn is Saturn, and so you would have incense specific to that if you were burning that, and different colored candles depending upon the works that you do. So this is really close to like what we call sympathetic magic, right? So if I had a puppet, or what some people would call a voodoo doll, I would want to associate it with the person I was trying to work on. And by the way, not all voodoo dolls are used for evil. Sometimes they use puppets to heal people. Um, but it's a stand-in, it's a representative. And so you might want a vibratory connection there. So you might get somebody's nail clippings or hair or a piece of clothing that they wore and incorporate that into the work that you're doing, right? It strengthens that connection. Now, can you do everything? Can you talk to spirits? Can you do magic? Can you do cursing? Can you do binding? Can you do uncrossing? Can you do all of these things without any kind of physical object? And the answer to that is yes. It's just more challenging, right? It just this makes things easier. It makes that connection easier, right? So you can do anything with anything or with nothing. You can do everything completely mentally. It's just harder. So having an altar gives us a place to focus on. As somebody with ADHD, um, it can be really hard to focus without some sort of stimulus. But also, the altar changes in vibration as we work with objects and they become sacred objects. Or we put them on an altar and we burn candles and we chant or pray or meditate in front of that. We're imbuing those objects with spiritual vibratory energy. It's like ringing a bell, okay? And the vibrations are going out into the universe. And so the altar becomes a portal is not the best word, but an ancestral altar can certainly be a portal. Um, it can become a doorway where spirits come in and out. And this is why I say, one of my biggest rules is don't put that ancestral altar where you sleep. Because your ancestors will be like, hey, it's 3 a.m. What are you doing? Let's have a chat. Your dreams will be, your dreams can be affected, all kinds of stuff. It can really affect your sleep. So, um, I recommend keeping ancestral altars out of your sleeping space. This is right smack in the center of my house, basically, or very close to it, as close as I can get. There's actually a stairway in the exact center of my house. So, um, but you could put it in other rooms as well. It's good to put it in a place where people are coming and going. Your family members are coming and going. So if that's a living room or even an entranceway or a dining room or whatever, what have you, um, think about that. You want to keep it somewhat protected. You want to keep it clean, dust it every so often and keep it clean and that sort of thing. And that's true for just about any altar that you might set up. You want to have a great deal of respect for it. So I studied mostly Japanese martial arts coming up, although certainly dabbled in other things. And so at the front of the dojo, which is, if you don't know, the dojo is where you practice. It means hall of the way. Um, there is what's called a kameza, and a kameza is seat of the spirits, and it's an altar basically. And when we bow in, we show respect to the altar. You're very careful not to do things like turn your back on the altar, and the altar is kept clean. There's usually like one or two students who are specially trained to take care of the altar, and it's really important. It's treated as somebody, it's where the spirits that came before come through and keep an eye on us, make sure we're learning the things we're supposed to learn, and make sure we're practicing safely and that sort of thing. So that's a little bit about ancestral altars, how to set them up, how to make offerings to them. And again, I recommend speaking to your ancestors. It might feel a little weird if you're not used to speaking out loud to spirits. One of the things I highly recommend, and this comes from my Norse shamanic practice that I'm been diving into, is singing. And some people will be like, singing? I can't sing. I can't carry a tune. That's okay. You don't have to sing for an audience other than spirits, and you don't have to do it when anybody else is around or anything like that. But make up little songs to call in the spirits. There's something really, really magical about singing that is used across many, many cultures. Uh, Spells are songs, and spell weaving are songs. And in some forms of what we call Norse shamanism or Seidr, um, you sing to call the spirits, and there are special songs that are used to call spirits in, and there are different ones. I know a very few at this point, but you can make them up as well. Again, the really important part is intention, right? I have the intention. I'm calling on my ancestors. I'm going to sing to them. You know, I'll do I'll do another live at some point on singing, and I'll sing a little bit. My voice is really harsh this morning. I think it's dry in my house right now. It's cold and cold outside, and the air is very dry. So I woke up with a little scratchiness. The coffee is not, coffee's not the best thing for your voice. Herbal tea with lemon is better. Lubricates the voice. I'm just looking for my dog. Not sure where she is at this point. Um, might have to go look for her. Juno. Hmm. Excuse me for just a second. I've never done this before, but I got to go look and make sure my dog is not up to trouble. I will be right back. Hold on just a moment. What you doing? Sorry, sorry. Such a terrible thing to do live, right? Walk away. My dog was chewing something up that she wasn't supposed to be chewing. I had this, it was quiet, but I had this sneaking feeling that she was up to no good. Um, so I had to go take something away from her. Anyway, so that's a little bit about ancestral altars. And I've talked for quite a while. I've talked for, gosh, close to an hour. I'm about 50. Well, I'm 51 minutes in. So I want to give some other teachings today as well, as sort of as promised. So um, I'm not going to lead a meditation today, but I'm going to give some hints on sort of deepening meditation. Um, a lot of people are a lot of people are interested in meditation and may not meditate because they feel like they can't meditate deep enough, or the big excuse I always hear from people, and I'm like, oh, I can't meditate because um the big one is because I can't stop my thoughts. Um, you know, so that, there's good news and bad news if you can't stop your thoughts. The good news is you're still alive, right? And you're probably not going to stop your thoughts. The bad news is you are not yet a fully enlightened Buddha. After 5 minutes of meditation practice, you have not um, reached the ultimate samadhi, right? You have not entered the first time you meditated, you sat down. So I'm going to give a couple of meditation tips coming from me, and there's a million ways to meditate, probably more. Um, and I teach specific methods, but whatever method works for you is great. But I'm going to give a couple of hints to help deepen meditation. I think everybody. I very rarely say everybody should do. I very rarely use the word should. Um, but I think everybody should meditate. Basically, everybody should meditate unless it causes a problem for your mental health, and that can happen. So if you find meditation is bad for your mental health for whatever reason, then don't, then stop. But if you meditate, I'm going to give you a couple of tips today. Um, so one way to deepen meditation. So this is coming from there's research out there on people who are quote unquote enlightened. And the scientific term for that is what they call it fundamental well-being. Fundamental well-being is just this pervasive feeling that everything is okay, right? And people reach that to certain stages, and there are people who've done studies and they've divided it up into different, this you're at stage 4 of fundamental well-being or whatever. It's to I'm nerdy and I like that stuff, but when you're trying to, like, that doesn't give people an experience of meditation, of deep meditation. So One of the things that I like to do is to uh, before meditation proper, and this can be a meditation practice in itself. There's a few recitations that I like to do. So one is I want to get into the state of fundamental well-being. I want to get into as much as I can, as best you can, is really all you can ever do, as best you can. As best you can, you want to feel like everything is okay when you start meditating. So I have a little recitation that I do, and you can do this recitation. And the recitation is: there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to do, there's nobody I have to be, right? And so what I'm doing, and I'll say that over and over again a few times, because the world that we live in, we always feel like if I'm sitting down to meditate, my mind might race ahead to what I need to do later, or that sort of thing. So I'm giving myself permission just to be and to sit in this moment. Just be with this moment as best I can. So right now in this moment, there's nowhere to be. There's nowhere for me to go. I'm here now. There's nothing I have to do, right? Maybe later, but not right now. Okay? All I'm going to do is to be. And there's nobody I have to be. When I sit down to meditate, I don't have to be dad. I don't have to be a teacher. I don't have to be John. I I just am, right? So that loosens things up for me a little bit before I start meditating. Then there's another little practice that I like, and this can be a meditation in itself as well. You can tie these things together, you can use them separately, you can use them in conjunction with other forms of meditation. They're just tools. I'm just handing out tools today. So with this one, I'm starting to, in the studies of awakening, enlightenment, fundamental well-being, one, the biggest sign is this pervasive sense of everything is okay, the fundamental well-being. Another one is less attachment to ego. On an extreme level, if you completely detach from your ego, what happens is um, you have a complete non-dual experience. Like you don't experience yourself as separate from the world. So you go through some non-duality. But we got to start somewhere. And so ego is just the stories that we have about ourselves. It's the stories and the ideas and beliefs that we have about who we really are. And most of those are false. And it's not to say that they're not useful. Um, they're very useful. That's why we have them. But in meditation, not so much, because it pulls us out of the state that we want to be in, this non-dual state. So there's another recitation that I do, and this separates havingness from beingness, right? So I'll say, I have a body. I have a body. You cannot be what you have. So I have a body, but I am not this body. Okay. This body is something I have. Okay. I'm also experiencing thoughts. Thoughts are coming up, feelings are coming up. I have thoughts and feelings, but I am not those thoughts or feelings, because those thoughts are fleeting. The thoughts go through my head in a fraction of a second. The feelings arise and fall and change over time. If I'm trying to figure out who I am at my core, trying to pin that to thoughts and feelings, um, is like having multiple personality disorder. I'm all over the place saying, this is who I am. This feeling in this moment is who I am. It's not. You have to take my word for it at this point until you experience it. So I have thoughts and feelings, but I am not my thoughts and feelings. I also have sensations. I have things coming in. I see things, I feel things. So I have perceptions and sensations, but I am not those perceptions and sensations. So I'll repeat those. I have a body, but I am not the body. I have thoughts and feelings. Thoughts and feelings arise, but I am not those thoughts and feelings. I experience sensations. Sensations arise, but I am not those sensations. I am not the things I see. I am not the things I hear. Okay. So I will repeat that several times. I have a body. I am not the body. I have thoughts and feelings. I am not thoughts and feelings. I have sensations and perceptions. I am not those sensations and perceptions. So repeat that a few times and then I'll ask, what am I? Now, when I ask, what am I, I'm not going for a verbal answer from my soul. I am just, what I'm trying to do is to have an experience. I am trying to have a pure experience of myself, yourself with a capital S, which is beyond words. Now, you might ask, what am I? And get a word coming back because your mind wants to do that. Your mind's going to throw something up. I am nothingness. I am everything. I am pure awareness. I am, and all of those are fine, but understand that those are just labels, right? And you're not your labels. You're certainly not, like, if you aren't your body, you're certainly not the labels you have for your body. Like when you call me, when people call me John, that's a label. When my kids call me dad, that's a label. And it may be true that I have, emotions for my daughters and I have, half of their DNA comes from me and all of these things. Um, those things might be objectively true, but that dad thing is just a label. And am I being dad right now? Right? I mean, in their minds, if they think of dad, they'll think of this body mind. But I'm not any of your I'm not any of your dads at this point. Maybe in a past life I was. You were all my mom in a past life. We know that, right? That's there's a Buddhist practice for compassion. Look at every single person you encounter as if they were your mother. And they were in a past life, and you were their mother in a past life. Um, so kind of a nice practice actually. So those are a couple of tricks. They're not tricks. They're practices for deepening meditation that can be done alone, they can be done together, they can be done in conjunction with that. With other meditation, with other forms of meditation. Usually beforehand, I would start a meditation with that. The first one, there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to do, there's nobody I have to be, really starts to get you settled in, right? It gets your mind to settle down. We're trying to the stress, your limbic brain, we're trying to get it to calm down a little bit and not say everything's a threat, right? And that helps us meditate. That helps us go deeper into meditation. We want to uh, we want to be relaxed in meditation, but not so relaxed that we are a puddle, that we're asleep. So those are some keys for deepening meditation. I spent a lot of time talking about ancestral altar, talk about deepening meditation. The other thing I want to talk about today, the last sort of thing I will leave you with is a little bit of spiritual self-defense. We'll put it that way. We'll call it spiritual self-defense, spiritual protection. I have a lot of people, I mean, a lot of people contact me who feel like they might be under spiritual attack or, something cursed or something going on. So I'm going to give you a couple of hints. The first one I'm going to talk about is how you might know if you are under some kind of spiritual attack. Um, and it can be tough because there can be very physical, ordinary reality reasons for a lot of things. So somebody has a pervasive, un hard to diagnose physical issue. It can be easy to go to, oh, I must be cursed, or somebody is sicking entities on me, or I have a possessing being, or something along those lines. Um, because that can be a symptom. Having a long-term illness that they're unable to diagnose, that is usually something that is I see this a lot with autoimmune stuff, or things that are zapping the energy away from people. Um, but even some long-term infections can show up almost the same way as possessing beings. And I think Lyme disease is a big one. Lyme disease go for many people who have chronic Lyme, it goes undiagnosed for years and can be debilitating, even lethal. Because it's not like when you get Lyme, it's not just Lyme disease. You get like three or they call it like Lyme and co-infections. You get like three or four infections at the same time. And it's parasitic and it hides and it's really insidious. Um, so that can show up very often, and there can be third possessing being energy with that. So here are from the top of my head, some of the symptoms of you know some sort of spiritual threat. So an attack, an entity, cursing, there's all different kinds. Okay, so um, and again, this is hard. You might have to, if you suspect it, you might have to contact a professional, somebody who deals with spiritual attack, to find out what's going on. But um, many spiritual attacks will affect what we might consider luck. So somebody who goes through a series of tragedies, I lost my, it's like a country western song. My woman ran away with my dog, and my truck broke down, and whatever. So like this huge string of really strange, um, terrible things happening to people. Sometimes that's an indication of cursed energy, but I would look for other things. Um, you know, are you seeing or hearing weird things showing up in your dreams? Now, that is not always an indication that something spiritual is going on. Very often, people contact me who have some sort of psychotic break, or psychosis of some kind, or have been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And my take on that is, um, somebody who even some people with autism. I found out recently that there are basically people with autism and people with schizophrenia um, have significantly elevated levels of a chemical that's basically DMT. So that there's a chemical that your brain produces that is a strong hallucinogen. And recent research with people both on autism spectrum and people with schizophrenia is that there's a high level of this chemical. Well, that chemical is what's in ayahuasca, the psychoactive component in ayahuasca, that causes people to like open up to the spiritual world. So I've been saying this forever, since I've been studying shamanism, that I think people with certain things that we consider mental disorders are just overly open to the spirit world, and they can't control the visions they're getting. We would, the medical professionals would call them hallucinations or delusions, or beliefs that are based upon, um, you know, based frequently upon hallucinations, or things, feeling like you're being persecuted, that sort of thing. And I understand it. Like, I can understand the feelings of persecution, of feelings of attack. Imagine if, just in your everyday perception, everywhere you looked, there were, demonic looking spirits, that sort of thing. You might be frightened. It would change how you believe things, it would change significantly how you perceive the world. Um, So I think there is truth to what people are seeing, but I think the interpretations can be off, right? Yes, you are being disturbed by these visions, the things that you're hearing. Things are arising in your consciousness that people are calling hallucinations that you see as real. It's a really tough, it's a very tough situation. It's a very difficult and challenging situation. Um, but that doesn't mean somebody's cursing you or that you have entities after you necessarily. So, you know, look for that. And I always tell people try to rule out organic stuff. So there are things that can cause, like there's something called depressive psychosis. So even if you have depression, if you have it bad enough, you might have hallucinations and delusions from that. Obviously, certain types of drugs and that sort of thing. So, um, health conditions that are either impossible to diagnose or don't clear up, or the way that they should, things that won't heal, sometimes can be curse energy or spiritual attack. Um, Real runs of horrible luck um, can be as well. Cursing can affect your what we call luck. It basically, zaps zaps your energy away. Um, your luck energy. In Norse, it's called the humming. Humming is actually an organ in the energy body that stores her with the like hereditary luck, the luck you inherit from your ancestors. Um, so sometimes there are certain types of spiritual attacks that are energy based. So you have people who are, they call them like energy vampires. They're like suck the life out of you just by walking in the room. And then there are people who can project energy that can like burn a hole in your aura. And this is also known as the evil eye. And some people just have this ability, or there's some people are born with it. It is inherited, and they have that ability, and they're doing it, and they don't even know that they're doing it. It's usually there's some intense negative emotion behind it, and the people can burn holes in your aura, which is bad. It's really bad because that will affect your health. It can, it's basically your etheric body is part of it is your it's like your spiritual immune system. And so it's like burning away part of your spiritual immune system and part of your shielding. So that's pretty dangerous. So that is a form of spiritual attack. And then there's all kinds of things where people can petition spirits to go after you and that sort of thing. So, um, but I would always caution people to, if there's anything that's health related, always get it checked out by a doctor first. If a doctor diagnoses you with something, um, and it doesn't get better, check it out. It could be a combination. And then there's usually a spiritual component behind any illness as well. So that definitely, something to be aware of. You can do spiritual healing while you're going through medical treatment as well. Just don't forego medical treatment for spiritual healing. So I'm going to teach you a really quick protection. Uh, Really quick protection thing that you can do. And this is really good if you're going into a space where the energy just feels gross. So for me, that's like any kind of big box store or a mall or anything, and there's just all this like really unhappy energy around. And you don't want to pick this up, but this is also good for shielding if there's somebody trying to do an active energy attack or something like this. Um, so an important concept here is that blue is considered very protective, cold color, many charms against like evil eye attacks or whatever. Use the color blue. So all you want to do is imagine. I have a little phrase that I'll remind myself if I'm going into a space where I don't love the energy. I'll just say shields up, and then I will. It's just a little thing I say to remind myself. And I imagine pushing out a bubble of blue, bright blue energy around me. And you don't have to like hold that in your brain the entire time. It'll fade over time, but at least you do it when you begin, or if you feel like something is going on, learn to shield. There's a lot more to energetic self-defense and protection than that, but that is a that's a hint that might be really helpful. So anyway, I've been talking for an hour and 15 minutes now. I'm gonna run for the day. I want to say thank you for joining again. Thank you for the birthday wishes. I hope this has been a good one for everybody. I hope people can learn some stuff. The recording of this is on YouTube, so and on my Facebook page. So if you want to go back and listen to anything that you may have missed or whatever, you certainly can do that. I hope everybody enjoys your day and the rest of your week. I think my children are bringing me an ice cream cake later, so that will be delightful. But I'll talk to you all very soon. My love to you, and have a great day.